Good afternoon and welcome to this live discussion from the European Parliament here in Strasbourg. Today we are going to talk disinformation and foreign interference in the European Union. I'm Robert from the social media team of the European Parliament, and to discuss about this subject I'm joined by Raphaël Glucksmann, who is a member chairing the committee that the Parliament set up to assess actually the level of threat and propose solution to counter these attempts to undermine democratic processes in the Union. Thank you very much for joining this live discussion. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here with you.
I'm very glad that you are here because we want to ask a lot of questions to you about what disinformation is, especially in these times where it's really important to address these issues. With the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, the European Union is more than ever affected by this. And I want all our viewers to ask their questions, if they have any, in the comment section on YouTube and on Facebook, and I'll try to ask as many as I can to my guest. Mr. Glucksmann, you had a first mandate of this special committee that the Parliament set up. What does this... and then now you're granted a second one, but I want to talk about the first mandate and how set the stage a little bit for us. How has it been like so far, and what were the main conclusions of the first mandate of this committee?
So first we wanted to create a specific committee in the European Parliament to establish a diagnosis on foreign interference in our democratic processes. Because the feeling was that actually, we had information coming on interference of Russian government during one election, during a referendum, for instance, during the Brexit referendum, or we had all witnessed how some of former head of governments from Europe were going to work for Gazprom in Russia or for Huawei in China, and we all knew that there was these troll factories in St. Petersburg attacking our public debates through social platforms, but there was never a general diagnosis on how big the threat is and how much foreign interference have an impact on our democratic life in Europe. So we wanted to establish this diagnosis, and then once the diagnosis is established, we want to make changes. Basically, that's the idea of being here. So we have set up many recommendations, going from the regulation of social platforms to the harmonization of laws all across Europe on the funding of political parties, or I mean, a very large spectrum of recommendation. And why we have created a new one is because we don't want it to be a one-shot. What we want to do is to follow if our recommendations are implemented and to prepare 2024 elections that will be clean from foreign interference.
And by implementation, you mean not only the EU institutions, but also looking into loopholes on a national level as well?
Of course, I mean, you know, it's always the same problem. We have 27 different legislations, for instance, if you take funding of political parties, 27 different rules. And the problem is that if you want to create a common European space, you need to harmonize rules. Yes. And if you want European elections to be really European, with a European debate, and I mean, you have seen, I'm sure you have seen the Parliament has voted for the transnational list, for instance. And then you need what? You need a common protection for this political space all across Europe. So a big part of our work has been to look into the loopholes, the differences between approaches in Malta or in France, for instance, and how you can have convergence there and make sure that we all play according to the same rules. Because if you are sitting in Moscow or in Beijing, of course you are making the same analysis as we are making here, and you are looking at the loopholes, and you invest these loopholes, and you manage to have an influence that you should not have over public debate in Europe.
And they have had the influence. There have been many debates on this. You mentioned the elections, the European EU elections, also the aftermath of Brexit, where we were first confronted with this issue. Talk to me a little bit about the tactics in general that are used to sow discord in especially in Europe, but everywhere where, you know, democracies, healthy democracies are.
So you have different actors and they have different strategies, and we have worked during 18 months to analyze what was their strategy and what type of actors were used and what was the impact. So for instance, if you take the two big players in foreign interference in Europe, I mean Russia and China, they have a different approach. The Chinese strategy is much more classical in a way. They want to buy your infrastructure to make sure they control your country. It happens in Greece or in Portugal, for instance, or not in the EU, but in Montenegro. And they have a classical approach. They buy infrastructures, they buy politicians, they buy influence through cultural elite or economic elite. Russians have brought the traditional interference to a whole new level, and a whole new strategy has emerged. It's what we have called the strategy of chaos. Okay. So basically, you are in the Russian regime. What you want is not so much to have friends in charge of European governments, but to have chaos in Europe.
And how does that manifest?
For instance, I will be very concrete. Yeah. In Spain,
yes,
they will support the two most opposite forces you can imagine. They will approach the independentists from Catalonia, and they will approach the nationalists from Vox. I mean, you cannot find most opposite forces in Spain, but they will support both, they will try to support both, in order to polarize the debate so much that institutions will be weakened and weakened and weakened till they collapse. And that's the idea everywhere. So they can support far left and far right at the same time. And it's something that's really efficient in this world of social media, because anything that is polarizing the debate is actually working on social media. And so they will use this new space of debate in order to make our society more and more polarized and to raise the mistrust in institutions at the national level and at the European level.
You mentioned the European level. We are at the European Parliament. You are a member of this Parliament. Do you see these tactics being used also in the European Parliament? Although this committee, we must say, has had an overwhelming support.
Majority, yes, but we have seen how much the far right was opposing the creation of our committee and then the findings of our committee.
Are there measures mentioned in your recommendations?
We have, for instance, measures on the political funding of coming from foreign regime, and we have all witnessed how much Russian regime has spent money and invested influence in order to support anti-EU populist far-right movements all across Europe. And it's not just one party, it's everywhere in Europe. You have these Russian footprints when it comes to populistic far-right. And here in the European Parliament, we have issues of even security of debate, thanks to far-right being the enablers of Russian interference. If you take the example, for instance, of a lady that has really made her news here, it's Tamara Volorova, who was the advisor of the group ID, and she was directly reporting to the Russian embassy whatever was discussed in the SEDE committee. So can you imagine? We can discuss, you and me, we are sitting in a committee at huis clos, and we discuss, I don't know, like weapons delivery to Ukraine. And you have somebody who is taking notes and then reporting to the Russians. And this is really something that is made possible by the lack of culture of security in the European institutions. So we have also recommendations from our report for the European Parliament to raise the security awareness and the security culture inside this building.
Coming back to the tactics used, can you come up with some examples of how ordinary people in the EU who don't have, we're not too exposed to this and are not very well informed about how to distinguish false information or misinformation from truth. What are some tactics used in our societies and how can people be aware of that?
So you have all encountered basically on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever,
Social media,
you have all
basically.
encountered, without knowing it, Russian interference. You have these troll farms in St. Petersburg, and they raise some profiles, and then you interact with them. You can even have a fight, and at the end of the day, it's not the profile that's described. Yes, it's somebody in St. Petersburg is writing. Even me on my Facebook account, for instance, I have the troll army from Prigozhin, with an oligarch close to Putin, coming from Central Africa, Mali, and suddenly they become experts in Donbass history, you know? Okay. And you understand that they are trolls, but worse now is that sometimes it's not even human beings behind that. It's artificial intelligence. And we just had a mission to Riga, where we had where we have experienced ourselves the creation of fake polemics on Twitter, on Facebook, through artificial intelligence. You just have keywords, you enter them, and then the computer writes for you a text, and they have that, and you can't notice it, basically. So what we need to do is to have public awareness campaigns. Media literacy education is a big part of our focus. And draw lessons from examples that do exist. For instance, we had a mission, the first mission of the European Parliament ever, to Taiwan. First official mission. Of course, some diplomats were a bit worried that it would be looked at as a provocation by Beijing. But actually, we went there to Taipei because we wanted to learn from a young democracy how they can build up their democracy while resisting to huge, much stronger than here, interferences coming from mainland China. And the lesson we draw from Taipei is that actually, instead of closing their system, they opened it up. And they created a really inclusive democracy in which citizens have a say in every debate and every reform. And they have a whole of society approach that involves think tanks, journalists, citizens, and government bodies in order to fight disinformation campaign coming from China. And it works. I mean, we have seen that. And they are much in advance compared to us. I mean, we are a bit old school compared to Taipei as we speak.
We're old school, but we're a rich continent,
yes.
And a rich bloc. What are some of the loopholes in terms of legislation that you have noticed and need urgent addressing, especially ahead of the EU elections?
So, ahead of the EU elections, I will insist on the legislation that are already in the tubes, DSA, DMA, how you regulate social platforms. And what we are doing here, I mean, for once, we are a bit in advance. And I think that it's a bit a terra incognita, and it's a new territory, the regulation of social platforms. But it's really fundamental if we want to keep this platform as an agora for shaping our public debate. Then political funding. It's a huge issue in Europe, and you have so many different legislation that you need to have an harmonization. Then I would
that qualifies as foreign interference, political.
Of course,
finding.
if you have a foreign regime, either through official structure or banks or oligarchs, with perverting the public debate by investing money in your public debate, then it's a huge issue for us. And the third example I would take is elite capture. We have no legislation as we speak now that will prevent a chancellor from Germany who has decided the building of Nord Stream to go then and work for Gazprom, as Mr. Schröder did. But then, how is it possible that we allow companies that are hostile to our principles and our interests, like Gazprom, to to provide our leaders with golden pensions? This is not acceptable. And so we need to have some rules there. And
do you think that you'll find the support in the parliament, especially on...
Well, in the parliament I will find the support, but I'm not sure I will find the support in the commission or in the council. But for sure in the parliament there is an awareness now, and this feeling that, I mean, for a very long period, we have acted as if we didn't have enemies anymore. That history in its tragic dimension had come to an end. And what we have seen now is that tragedy did not end. We are living a tragic time. And we have still enemies and adversaries, and very violent ones. And so we need to protect our democracies, and we need to protect also this feeling for citizens that they are protected by their leaders, and that when they vote for somebody and he will take a decision, it will be for the general interest of his people, not for the sake of a foreign company who promised him a contract just after his mandate. Yes, I mean, this is a bit problematic, and we have to act against this.
The war in Ukraine has fueled more disinformation campaigns, as the European External Action Service calls them, information manipulation campaigns. This is an evolved term now for this umbrella term for misinformation, disinformation. How do you see the situation, and what do you think about the EU ban of Russian outlets in the EU? Has that somehow helped to minimize the risks?
First, let us be very clear. This ban was absolutely legitimate and necessary, because we are not speaking about media. You know, media, they have a deontology, they have a code, they have a criteria of independence. We were speaking of tools in the hands of a regime that was waging a war. Yeah. So they are part of Putin's system. They are not medias. And so it's perfectly legitimate if you sanction individuals, if you sanction companies, banks, oil or gas companies, and fake media or outlets, as you said. Yeah. It's the right term, then it's perfectly legitimate. But it will not circumvent Russian propaganda from entering the public debate in Europe, because it's useful, but their strategy was not based only on Sputnik or on RT. It was just a tiny part of their ecosystem. And what they are betting on is more high-level profiles and enablers in European countries, and it's much harder to struggle against enablers, because if you have a Spanish, a French, or an Italian media that are used by the Russian regime to channel the propaganda, then we are in much harder situation to regulate and to block. So that's the thing. Then I want to repeat it, because I know that there are some concerns in Europe. We don't want to create a ministry of truth. I mean, if you want to believe that the earth is flat, it's your absolute right. I mean, I will be, of course, disagreeing with you and a bit finding that you might look stupid by saying that the earth is flat, but as a legislator, I will not enter into it. But if I find out that a foreign regime is spending millions so that my fellow citizens are believing in numbers of millions that the earth is flat, then it becomes a topic and a concern for the legislator. So we don't want to create a ministry of truth, but we want to prevent foreign regimes to actually from having a say in our public debate.
Do you believe that it's possible that in the near future should be a package of legislation EU-wide that covers all of these areas and that addresses specifically, you know, cases of foreign interference, but also how these actors act actually in the European Union and how they should be punished? Because often it's just small
I mean,
punished, right?
You know, I'm new in the parliament, but I'm old enough to understand that it will not be one decisive package. It will be several packages, but we will push for that, and that's why we created ING2. It's because we don't want executive branch and we don't want the council to think, you know, okay, Parliament got excited and then drops the subject, which often happens in the Parliament. You know, you get focused on one topic, you push very hard, you have a very strong political message, but then you switch to something else. And that's why I insisted that we will go on with our committee until it's implemented. I mean, we will follow up and we will question the Council, question the Commission, and make sure that we have a much more protected democracy in Europe than today.
How can, well, we see the big actors use disinformation campaigns to undermine democracies, but not only in the EU, also outside of the EU, according to their interests. But what, when it comes to allies, especially Eastern neighborhood partners, especially on the east of the European Union, partners in the North African region, but also the partners, our partners in the Western Balkans, which are candidate countries for EU accession. What do you think the EU's role should be in supporting and equipping?
We need much more presence. I mean, we need to consider that it's already our space. They are not members, but it's our common space, and we need to protect it, because our absence has allowed, and the lack of clarity of European objectives on the ground have allowed Russia and China to over-invest in these neighboring countries. Because when you leave countries in a gray zone, then that's much easier for Russia and China to enter. And so, for instance, I will tell you, in Georgia, and the way they proceed is that they target vulnerable groups, you know, minorities.
I was going to ask you this question.
So
it's
for
important
instance, in Georgia, there was never an issue about LGBTI rights, you know, like never. And suddenly, you have demonstrations and people getting out in the street to beat up pro-LGBTI activists. And we all wonder, where did it come from? I mean, for those who know this country, it was never an issue. And in fact, what we have identified is that Russians have invested money in websites, in specific hardcore far-right Orthodox groups, and they have created this issue out of nothing. And then it became a big topic, leading to street violence and identification of LGBT rights, EU, European integration, and making it a fight for the soul of Christian Georgia, yeah? And this is really shaped from the scratch by
manufactured.
It's totally manufactured. It was not a debate, and suddenly they invest money, energy, knowledge, as they say themselves, polytechnology, that's a Russian word, on one topic, and it burns suddenly the streets of Tbilisi. And we have the same happening in every neighboring country, and we have to fight against that. But for this, you need to give to these people a horizon, which is European integration, long term, and a clear strategy on the ground on what kind of principles we are defending and how much we are ready to invest on media literacy, on education, and on other fields. Plus, another thing, we need to really work closely with them in the defensive approach, which is that they have, for instance, in Moldova or in Ukraine, identified a lot of Russian actors that are also operating in European space, and we have identified other actors. So we need to have a shared defense system against disinformation campaign coming from Moscow.
Do you see also cooperation between, I believe there is, between NATO countries, which are not members, some of them are not members of the EU, and the EU, some of which countries are not members of NATO.
Yeah,
NATO does have a system to tackle hybrid threats.
Yes.
Does the EU have a similar?
Well, we are, let's be honest, it's like the half empty, half full glass. We are starting to have a system that's the bases are promising, but we are not there yet.
Task force, right?
Yeah,
you are referring
we have I mean, I just went to Riga, so to the NATO Stratcom center, and they really have a great knowledge on how to identify and tackle disinformation. But we have also now at the EAS a unit.
Election service.
Yes, sorry. When I speak the jargon,
it's like the foreign ministry of the EU.
Yeah, the foreign ministry of the EU, if you want. So at the External Action Service, we have now a unit led by Mr. Gullner, who is really efficient on that. But it's new, and it needs to grow. And until very recently, we didn't have anybody checking what China was doing, for instance. And now we have. But it's a joint evolution, and the more the parliament puts pressure and raise the profile of the topic, the more you have money invested in this. So it's useful. It's a direct response to our work here.
Hopefully this will also find support in the European Union, because it's important to have mechanisms to fight disinformation.
Of course, but you know, it's not only public bodies that need to invest, because actually when you take European companies, they are investing much less than American companies on cybersecurity. And the way the Russian or Chinese regimes are conducting their attacks, they identify weakness, and then they have pirates doing it for them. So it can be perfectly also targeting private actors and ask for ransoms. And this is something that's still, both in the private and the public sector in Europe, we are not there yet, mentally first.
Why?
Because we are slow, let's face it. And second, well, we really believed in this idea that we will not have enemies anymore. Who will attack us? We are nice. I mean, we have social security systems. We care for the environment. We are the European Union. We love peace and everything. So we never, I mean, security was very far away from us. And we didn't listen. For instance, when you had Estonians or Latvians or Poles coming to us in Western European capitals saying, look, the storm is coming, so we need to get ready and prepare. Nah, come on. I mean, it's the ghost of your past. You are still like bleeding from Russian occupation, so you are worrying about everything that's happening in Moscow, but we know Putin. He's not our enemy. He's not our adversary. That was the music that was played in Paris, Berlin, Madrid, or Rome.
Has this perception changed in the meantime, now with the war in Ukraine?
24th of February changed everything. And we have seen how much now Western European capitals care about the findings of our committee, because when we have set up the committee, of course, there was no war in Ukraine. But now with invasion, everybody understands that, okay, so maybe we have an enemy after all, and maybe this enemy is dangerous. So we need to pay more attention. But if you take an example to show you, in 2017, the presidential candidate Emmanuel Macron had a campaign, and he was in a runoff against Marine Le Pen, who was a great friend of Vladimir Putin and Putin's regime. Hackers attacked Macron's campaign and produced what was called then the Macron leaks. Yes, and these hackers were identified. We all know they belong to the Russian system. And what was the consequence? I mean, you hack just before the main election of one of the main European countries. And what is the consequence for that? I mean, what did we do during 5 years in Paris or in Brussels to punish those who perpetrated this? Nothing. So I mean, our naivety has led Russia to think, and rightly so, Russian regime, that it was the cheapest investment possible. I mean, with a great return. You know, you do something, you know you don't have consequences, and the money you need to invest in order to destabilize the public debate is very little compared to, I don't know, what you invest in infrastructure if you want to buy a port or a bank.
What other, like just shortly, briefly, are there other means of hybrid threats that people should be aware of, except for disinformation, foreign interference through financing? What are those threats that we need to look
for the future?
Yeah.
That everything that technology makes possible.
Artificial intelligence?
Yeah, artificial intelligence, you will have the deep fakes. I mean, I really, again, I experimented that, and I could not sleep at night after, because I thought, okay, so I can shape a video of, I don't know, Zelensky or von der Leyen taking drugs or something, and it looks now, we still have technical issues, but it will look like absolutely true. Or this is maybe too big, but I make you say something that you didn't say. But it will look exactly like we have this conversation now, except that you will say something really outrageous. And let's say I'm candidate to an election, presidential election. 3 days before, you make a video and you are a Russian agent and you don't want me to win. You make a video of me saying really outrageous thing or recognizing that I did something totally illegal or whatever. And it will look absolutely like it's me. And then what's happening? So we will have really to first have a technical defensive line that's quite powerful, but also education. And everybody will need to be used to these techniques. And,
thinking critically,
yeah,
digital literacy.
You will need a lot of investment in modern infrastructures, but you will need also a return to philosophy lessons and try to raise our critical spirit. Esprit critique. It's really fundamental because we will be more and more surrounded with really hard to detect fake informations.
Absolutely. Before coming here, I got a call from some stranger with a Belgian number telling me that my national ID has been hacked and is being used for criminal purposes. For a second, I believed that too. So, which means that people still tend to believe things.
Yeah.
When you see it, it's even more real, let's say.
Yeah, of course.
It's even more difficult
and
to
if
not
you have
believe
an already polarized society and you already strongly dislike Mr. Draghi, and then you have Mr. Draghi shown, and yes, of course, you will see it as a confirmation of what you always believed in. So you will share it, and then it will spread. So it's and how much time, every time you have to deny fake news, for your denial to penetrate in the public opinion, it's very long, while the spread of the fake is very quick. So it's really it's dangerous. We will live in a dangerous world, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I hope that somehow you answer the question of Victor from YouTube, who says, should it be a subject in European schools to study information gathering and democratic self-defense? I don't know.
For sure, for sure, it starts in school, and the more we will be familiar with the social platforms, the technologies, the more we will be immunized, because what we have, it's like vaccine. In fact, we need to get vaccinated, and for that we need to know the field on which we will have the debate, and we need to understand this world in which virtuality and reality will be mixed. And what we have seen also in our studies is that young people who are supposed to be more targeted because closer to the virtual world, are in fact less buying the fake news campaigns because they are already used to it. And so we need to have a real education from school to way after school, because people who are already pensioners, they still vote. They still have a very important
and
say.
They use social media. And
they also use Facebook like the others. So we need to have a permanent education. But yes, on school for sure. And it's part of our recommendation. We need to have programs in school on this.
Thank you very much. This has been most interesting, and I hope we'll have you back to talk about the work of your special committee on foreign interference and disinformation in the EU.
We can have a meeting before European elections, and
absolutely.
I will tell you if various governments in Europe or the Commission took all the measures that we asked in order to make this election safe and really European. Absolutely,
we'll ask those questions. It's an important milestone, not just for the European Parliament, but also for EU citizens. Thank you to everyone who has followed this, and for the cinema lovers, don't forget to join us on Wednesday at 2 p.m., where we will talk to the winner of the Parliament's Film Prize, Lux Awards. So stay tuned until then. Thank you.